Hi, we're Washington Libertarians,
bringing you the hard-hitting news and libertarian analysis you have come to know and love.
and also giving a voice to Washington State Libertarians.
I'm Elliot, Tech Director of Washington State and Chair of King County.
And I'm Danielle, the Events Director of Washington State and Vice Chair of King County.
Go to lpwad.org/donate to donate to the Libertarian Party of Washington.
And go to lpwa.org/events to learn about all the upcoming events.
Join our Discord.
And enjoy the episode.
So if it's all right, I have one that I've been working on that I've not posted yet, that I have a lot of good information on, and I've been reluctant to write it up because I don't know how well it's going to be received. But are you guys open to just having a spitball conversation about it and maybe developing it together? And then if there's a decent amount of popularity on YouTube, I'll write it up and post it, and then we can start turning it into a real thing.
I mean, sure. Do we want to start a little bit further back, though? Or when was the last time we... So, first off, we're going, right?
Yeah, well, so we're technically recording, but yes, Elliot's correct. We should introduce ourselves, probably.
Oh, okay.
That sounds great. That sounds great, Kobe, though, as like a preface to our conversation. I consent.
Okay, awesome.
To this conversation. Cool. Hi, Elliot.
Hi, Danielle.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
We also have Kobe here.
Hi, everyone.
Kobe.
How's it going, Kobe?
Hi, it's good. How are you?
Oh, Kobe is our legislative director. He's here to tell us about like some legislative proposals that we're thinking about and working on and all that good stuff. And so have we had Kobe on in a while? I think I missed him at one point, right?
I talked to Kobe without you, yes.
Okay.
I think it was last month, the last time we had him.
Okay, so Kobe, how's it?
We did miss you.
Okay, so
we commented on it.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah.
No, but yeah. So just tell us, how's the legislative department been in the last month? Like, what's up?
It's been good. I think we got one more proposal in, which was approved and signed, and I've been engaging with our attorney. I left him a message yesterday to get a sense for what he's going to charge us per bill. That way, we can put together a department budget for next year, which Anna has indicated I need to have done by our next meeting, which I think is in a week and a half or so.
Oh shit, you're right.
We do have an SEC meeting coming up, yeah.
Oh, bro.
Anyway,
State Executive Committee meeting, for those who don't know what SEC means. It's not the other one about the money and stuff.
Yeah, it's not the money one.
So you talked to the lawyer, Kobe. Next year we got a budget that you're going to propose for the legislative department, but we don't have that fee yet. We're waiting for the lawyer to get back to us.
that's right. Yep. And then in the meantime, I've been playing around with two new proposals that I've not yet shared with everyone, but I'm working through some problems in each of them that I'm trying to get resolved.
Awesome. Yeah, tell us about those ones you got coming down the pipe.
Sure. So the one that I'm working on I'm working on two, and one of them is I'm calling the Freeway Freedom Proposal, which is just a big overhaul of the traffic system and all of the authoritarian things within the traffic system that we'd like to change. And I'm talking like, lane splitting for motorcycles. There's not really any good reason other than perception not to allow lane splitting. Seatbelt laws, traffic cameras, all that sort of stuff. That one's relatively self-explanatory, and I just need to put the time in to write it and submit it. We can do a whole separate video on that one. But the one that I'm hoping you guys can help talk me through is one that I'm working on wages. And, wages is kind of a sensitive topic for libertarians because we don't interfere in markets generally unless there's a monopolistic market failure or some form of coercion in the market. We generally don't intervene. And wages are a hot topic. So I want to talk a little bit about minimum wage. I want to talk a little bit about what I would propose as an alternate to minimum wage, which would allow us to get rid of minimum wage, and how an intervention might be acceptable. And then I also want to talk about the dichotomous left-wing definition of exploitation and wage exploitation. You guys on board for that?
Yeah, let's get into
Ooh,
it.
yes, wage exploitation.
Yes, exploitation. And that's always a fun one to talk about. So before I get into the actual wage proposal, I want to highlight the two different definitions I understand from the left on what exploitation is, and there are two. And then I want to talk about minimum wages and why people don't like minimum wages, because I think the concept of not understanding and liking minimum wages is a really hard thing for people on the left to understand. They look at minimum wage like it's only a positive, and that anybody who thinks minimum wage is a negative is just an exploitative employer or somebody who's, heartless and cares too much about money. And I think I want to dispel that myth, and I want to talk about exploitation, and then I want to talk about an alternative to those. So I'll start with exploitation. So the two definitions that I hear from the left on exploitation are A, earning profit on an employee, that's exploitation, or B, not providing for the employee's needs, right? And somehow, if you apply for or if you provide for employee needs, all of a sudden you're off the hook, right? You're allowed to earn as much profit as you want, and nobody brings out the pitchforks and torches, so to speak. And I've got some case examples of what I'm talking about here. So you'll hear the left talk a lot about and complain a lot about Uber and how much Uber pays their drivers, and that they're slave wages, and that because there's no benefits, they're being taken advantage of. And the counter to that, from my perspective, is well, Uber's not earning anything. They don't generate a profit. So if Uber's not generating a profit, how could they possibly be exploiting their employees, right? And then the other message that we get is that Amazon makes all this money on their employees, and they don't provide their fair share to the employees. But Costco is a saint because Costco provides for the needs of their employees. But if you look at the actual numbers, Amazon generates on average a profit of 12.3% over employee wages. So they pay on average their employees in 2021 $48,000, and they earn on average about $6,000 per employee. So that's a 12% yield over productive wages. Costco pays an average of $46,800, which is less, by the way, and they earn $14,642 over wages on average. So that's 31%. So I don't understand how Amazon's considered exploitative and Costco isn't. It just doesn't make sense. So are you guys following so far? You have any questions about that?
I just had one small question, Kobe, which was about this. You said earlier about Ubers. They're not making profit off the drivers. Could you drill on that for a second? Or
oh yes, Uber as a company lost. I don't know the exact number, but they lost hundreds of millions of dollars at least. They did not actually post a profit, and they have never posted a profit before. So.
I see. So okay, and so in that regard, like the way that normally the original Marxist notion of labor exploitation is that the capitalist class makes a profit, and then the capitalist class makes a profit, and then the labor is labor, right? That's a certain amount of cost, right? And then the capitalists scrape off a certain amount of the cost of their labor as profit. The problem is that in this case, Uber isn't making a profit. So how the heck could they possibly be exploiting workers? Because in a certain way, they're almost anti-exploiting the workers, right? The workers are exploiting the capitalists. Yes, precisely.
It's it's corporate welfare, as I define it. It's a bunch of private investors getting together to support people who can't otherwise find jobs.
Exactly.
I don't understand why Uber is not celebrated by the left as a gracious company, because they lose money every year employing people. So, but yeah, I think you got the gist there, Elliot. So the way that those two things are at odds with each other is, you've got Costco, which is perceived as a gold standard for taking care of your employees, yet they actually make more on their employees than companies who are considered or are demonized for not taking care of their employees. So I guess my only gripe there is we got to stick to a consistent, definable, observable, objective definition of what exploitation is. And, basing the idea of exploitation on employee needs is fundamentally flawed because everybody has different needs, and needs are theoretically endless, right? You always need more stuff. So I think you can make a rational argument that earning extravagant amounts of money over and above labor productivity at a point can become exploitative.
Starbucks in 2020 had 349,000 employees, and they made $19.2 billion. So on average, Starbucks made $54,000 per employee. And you might say, well, gosh, how is that possible? Amazon only earned $6,000 per employee. Well, yeah, Amazon has 1.3 million employees. Starbucks only has 349,000. So, the number of employees has a pretty big factor in the conversation. Starbucks' average pay for their employees was $30,000 per employee. So Starbucks on average is making 183% above employee wages, compared to Amazon 12% above employee wages. Now, I would make the case that Starbucks is exploiting their employees, and companies like Amazon, Costco, and Walmart are less so.
So anyway, the point is that Starbucks, generates 183% profit over wages, and Amazon generates 12%. And I was wondering if you guys would agree that Starbucks objectively would be deemed as exploiting their workers to some degree in their lack of bargaining power.
I don't know if so here's the problem, right? Is that for me, when it comes to exploitation, like, I'm still not even sure what that means. Like, I would personally, how about this? Why don't we get other libertarian definitions of exploitation, because we have like the lefty one, and then my notion of exploitation would be something like involuntary, or like, you're using extortion, or a type of a slavery type of thing for exploitation. And so in my mind, Starbucks is definitely not exploitative in terms of like, it's definitely not my favorite job probably, but I know that some people like it, and they do offer some pretty interesting benefits like college and tuition and stuff, and they pay the appropriate wage and blah blah blah, these things, right? So
sure. Well, what is the appropriate wage? I think what your definition of an appropriate wage is whatever somebody's willing to work for. And I think the left-wing definition of an appropriate wage is an amount that's equivalent to the productive value that somebody is generating. Would that be more or less accurate?
Yes, I think the kind of issue though is that obviously, like, I would define those as the same, right? But I get what you're saying. Like I think, well, and we won't get super philosophical
that's
about
a really
this,
good point. There is a good argument that can be made that they're the same thing, and I think the basis of the argument that they're the same thing lies within the idea of subjective value, and that an individual is the only person who can identify what is fair for their situation. And is they're rationally capable. And if a rationally capable individual has perfect information, they will bargain for a wage that is equivalent to what their actual value is. And through that bargaining process, the net result is what their value is, regardless of how much value they actually generate for the company. And, that I think is the fundamental disagreement between the left and the right. Well, not really. I mean, the left is kind of off in left field with the need situation. But if you look at just profit over wages objectively, that's the fundamental difference. And I think the argument that I would make to you, Elliot, is that when you have an unskilled laborer who has imperfect information about the amount of value that they're generating, I don't think any Starbucks barista figures out precisely how much value they're adding. If they did, they would probably form a union. And I think the reason for that is that when they come to the table to bargain for their wages, they don't bargain for the value that they generate. And that's a failure of the school system. But what they bargain for is what they think they need relative to what they think they could get someplace else.
Basically, like, I think, and I don't want to get super bogged down in the libertarian side of the philosophy, because while it's interesting, you know, people who are better at this conversation have already had it between both sides, right? I think
Sure.
what we basically, the differences that you and I would have in this conversation are, it sounds like you're coming from a what would be called neoclassical, maybe Chicago side, and I'm going to be coming from a more Austrian side. But at the end of the day, you know, so if you're familiar with that argument, which I think most of our viewers are, well, I know you are, Kobe.
I agree with everything you just said. That makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
Yep.
So we're our disagreements are on those things for sure. But at the end of the day, you know, I'd love to hear what your legislative proposal is
what the legislation
specifically.
is.
Yes.
So here's the proposed legislation, and it's meant to serve two purposes. The first purpose is to eliminate minimum wage, and I didn't really get a chance to talk about why that's a positive thing. The gist is that if you set minimum wage above market equilibrium, it can cause unemployment. It doesn't always cause unemployment because we don't always know what equilibrium prices are relative to what the minimum wage is. But applying a single minimum wage across all industries will result in unemployment in some instances. It might not result in unemployment in all instances, but it will in some instances. That's true for union prevailing wages as well. Like, a good example of that is prevailing wages that the government pays to skilled laborers relative to what private industries pay to skilled laborers to produce housing. Socialized housing costs more because the government pays a prevailing wage. And there's a labor shortage, which prevents private developers from building affordable housing because everyone's working for the government at prevailing wages. So that's a good example of how minimum wages can have a negative impact on society as a whole. So what I would propose to replace... Go ahead.
Can you tell me what you mean when you say prevailing wages?
Oh, yeah. So what a prevailing wage is it's a minimum set wage for a particular task. In the case of a government, prevailing wages are set against union rates, and union rates are collectively bargained. So the net delta, as an example, for like a laborer on a prevailing wage job is going to be like $70 an hour, whereas I'm going to bill them out as $45 an hour. Prevailing wages, on average, cost the American people about 33% more to have a socialized institution produce something than if they have the private market produce it. And the reason for that is because the government requires that anybody working on a government subsidized job is paid a higher wage than they would be in a competitive market.
I see.
Yeah. And you guys can all do your own research online about that. But prevailing wage is effectively a minimum price you're allowed to pay people if you work on a government project. And in almost all instances, it's more than it would be if you were paying somebody to work on your own proposal. So that's that one. So that's the problems with minimum wage. So my proposed solution is this. And this is going to start at a national level, and we're going to work down to the state level because we're a state party. I don't have national authority. But ideally, and this is an opinion I'm still working through with you guys now, but ideally, I would suggest that in lieu of a minimum wage, we set a wage ratio in that corporations who have more than 500 employees, and Danielle, to your point, you told me the other day, corporations aren't people, so let's keep that in mind. But corporations that have more than 500 employees could only collect between 5 and 10%, and I don't know what the right number is, between 5 and 10% of profit over and above wages paid. So a company like Starbucks, you'd see people get, their salaries would effectively more than double. And then companies like Walmart or Amazon would get, 6 or 7% increases in wages. And what that does is it creates a systemic mechanism for employees to be paid based on the objective value that they generate. And it creates a mechanism for there to be less income disparity without the need to bargain for it. So it also allows us to hopefully eliminate unions, right? Because now you can pay people higher wages. They can use those higher wages themselves to benefit their communities and pay for their own goods and services, without the government needing to take care of them. And it does it assists in fixing the income disparity without the need for a government bureaucracy. It leverages the free market in a way that allows income to be produced and distributed based on objective value generated rather than bargaining. So that's the general national gist. And before I talk about how I think I can accomplish that on a state level, I'd like your thoughts on that.
The question that I have is, you said something about the workers' objective value in somewhere, and I don't want to like super, again, get super bogged down in the philosophical, economic side of things, but like, what is like, what definition of objective value are you using here, basically?
Yeah, the definition I'm giving of objective value would be the market value of their labor in relation to the total income of the company. In other words, the argument that I'm making is that objective value for a Starbucks employee is 183% times what they were actually paid, or for an Amazon employee, it would be 12% more than what they were actually paid. And what I'm saying there, and I understand the difference between subjective value in the Austrian school and the neoclassical school that I talked about, and the left-leaning schools of objective value. But what I'm suggesting is that we tie wages to corporate earnings for corporations that have more than 500 employees. Now, we're not going to dictate how those wages get distributed. We're just going to dictate that corporations cannot earn more than 5 or 10% ahead, or something like that.
Interesting. So it's like it's like a profit cap or something, or
not a profit cap, and that's the other beauty of this. The more employees that you hire, the more you make per head, the more earnings you distribute. So there is still infinite scalability, theoretically, if the population continues to grow exponentially. And there is still limitless profit potential. You just have to share a greater percentage of that profit with the workers.
Like, not just for labor, but generally labor costs is like 30% and employees, like the back of the envelope calculation, right?
Labor cost is 30% of what?
Of your costs, I suppose, usually.
Oh, your outlays. Like, so if you're a business owner, then labor costs are approximately 30% of your outlays. I get what you're saying.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes. So like, I mean, and I don't mean to just kind of ask random questions here and there, but that's the first thing that pops to my mind, right? Is like, aren't usually labor costs roughly 30% on your average industry? And maybe there's some weirdos like Starbucks that are outliers, right? But how do you think that affects that sort of back of the envelope situation?
That calculation, right?
Yeah.
So, well, what happens is that labor becomes a much larger expense burden on the company. Just, bar none. It would go up from something like 30% to 90%, and it would never change. It would just always be 90%. And the reason for that is because the net revenue would be distributed to the employees, like as a profit sharing, effectively, at the end of every year.
So it kind of turns most corporations into co-ops, then, wouldn't it?
It does. And not entirely. And the difference between the key difference is that in a co-op, the employees have a lot more directive authority. It's run more like a democracy, right? In that they get to decide the direction of the company. Corporation structure would still be board of directors and a CEO making all the decisions. The employees still have no decision-making authority. They're still at will. It's just that the profit would get shared at the end of the year. So that allows for the existing market structure to exist similar to a co-op without actually upsetting the balance of power in the organization.
But if 90, and pardon me if I'm slow here, but if 90% of your cost is going to your employees, wouldn't that put most people out of business, or?
No, it wouldn't put anybody out of business. Not one. So,
Okay.
especially because I'm not talking about small businesses, remember. I'm only talking about corporations with more than 500 people, number one. Number two, the only thing which is getting distributed is the net income at the end of the year. So Starbucks, for example, $19.2 billion in 2019. You could still earn $19.2 billion. You would just have to have more employees to do it. So, like as an example, you instead of having 250,000 employees, you would have to be more like an Amazon that has $1.2 million employees, or a Walmart that has $2.2 million employees, or 2.2 million employees. Right? Those companies are bigger from a capitalization perspective, and they make more money, but they earn less per employee, which was the purpose of the exercise, right? They only earn 12%. So the change for Amazon is like 2%. They would take a 2% loss on revenue. It would be nominal, like hardly anything. Starbucks would be a much larger loss on revenues. They still would not be out of business. They'd still be $1 billion company.
Okay. So would you say, and again, I'm just trying to talk out loud here. Would you say that this would be kind of like maybe a direct response to UBI type of conversation?
Yes. Yep. I would suggest that you would do it in lieu of UBI, right? Because what you're doing is you're creating a larger incentive for productivity, in that wages worked at companies which produce more societal value will be worth more. Whereas with a UBI, you're paying people not to work, right? So what I'm trying to accomplish is I'm trying to accomplish something similar to UBI in that it's going to redistribute wealth. But it's going to redistribute wealth which has not yet been earned. We're not redistributing existing wealth, no wealth taxes like that. And it's only going to redistribute wealth insofar as the people who are receiving the wealth are the same people who are producing it.
Okay.
And I think maybe I missed something earlier. Elliot was taking a selfie, by the way. That's why I laughed.
I feel like I'm on point today.
Yeah, he does look great with his whole podcasting setup over here. He has
Thank you, Danielle.
4 foamies behind his head, too.
You know what's funny, by the way, is that my foamies are all grid-like patterned, and Danielle's foamies are like all cattywampus.
They are
it's like so perfect.
Anti-grid-like. Yeah, we should take photographs to post in the Discord for
oh my god, I'm going
our
to do this
3
right
fans.
now. It's freaking ridiculous.
So I think something that I missed, though, Kobe, is if we are doing this whole like mandatory percentage share thing, this how do we factor in any of the benefits that a company might want to share, like or want to have, like health insurance and whatnot?
Sure. So if an employee creates more health insurance or creates more benefits, that comes off of their net revenue, right? So that expense hits first, all of those, and then whatever's left over at the end gets distributed back to the employees. So in other words, employees would earn less net dollars, but they would get the associated benefits. However, I don't know if you remember at our healthcare video, but I suggested direct pay health programs in which, private insurance companies are kind of axed out and we work directly with doctors. I think this wage ratio system would allow people the resources they need to pay out of pocket for doctor services, and then you can have a classically competitive healthcare market without the need for insurance companies. So, which would hopefully also be, a net benefit. But yes, if a corporation decided to offer different benefits like school tuition or what have you, that gets calculated before the distribution of profit.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I understand this is new, and there's a reason I've been contending with this. I'm not entirely convinced myself that it's worth writing up because I don't know how well it's going to be received. And there's whenever you think about something new like this, there's a lot of things to think about. But so far as I can tell, nobody's going to go out of business. It helps, workers receive more of the value.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
It does it in a way which is systemic and doesn't require the government to intervene or have some big bureaucracy to manage the whole system.
I like it in so far as I've never heard it before. I would love to. So, Kobe, did you get this from anywhere in particular?
Nope.
This like...
No, I did not. No, I spent a lot of time looking at all the annual reports for these companies, figuring out what they earn per employee and figuring out what they pay their employees. And this has just been a culmination of my own independent research. And also, even my definitions of exploitation are a little bit new. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find a middle ground between Austrian, as you described, classical, as you described, and Marxist, as I described on the left. And I think this kind of culminates all of them to a certain degree in a way that is Well, I don't know what it is. That's why I wanted to talk to you guys about it. So it's not for me to decide, right? I can't work in a bubble.
Yeah, no, I almost wish, gosh, I wish I like knew some of like the Austrian economists or something, or like, because my first question would be like, Bob Murphy, what do you think of this, right? Not in terms of like it tearing it down, but because it's a novel idea. And I'd be really interested to see what like a trained economist of any stripe, really, honestly. But obviously in particular, I want to see what my boys think. But then also, I'd love to see like a neoclassical or Chicago, or even like a Marxist. I'd love to see what some economists would have to say about this kind of proposal.
So I think I caught most of that. He's a little distanced, but I think what he said was he doesn't want to shut it down because it's a novel idea. He's not convinced that it really meets the libertarian criteria from a non-aggression perspective. But he'd be interested to see what actual economists have to say about it. Did I get all that right?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, like, obviously it's a government thing, so, I mean, like, it doesn't... But at the end of the day, we're here to legislate. We're not here to, like, be an anarchist, right? So,
right.
Yeah. Right, but...
Yeah,
no,
so my proposal on a state level would be this. Because you're right. I think we need to start the conversation and get people who are smarter than me talking about it and figure out if it's a really good idea or not. And so I would propose creating a piece of Washington state legislation which only trigger in the event 2/3 of the states also agree to it. And we just put it on the books and say, look, we want this wage ratio implemented nationally and implemented on a state level, and we'll only agree to do it after everyone else agrees to do it. And it does nothing but start the conversation. Maybe it's a horrible idea and nothing ever comes of it, but I think it puts it on the table, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about a novel idea that hasn't been talked about before.
Yeah, I love new ideas, dude. Like, it gets boring without new ideas, right?
Oh, yeah. No, and even more, it gets just so run out, right? I mean, everyone knows the other person's argument, and you just hit loggerheads. You can't, everyone's so entrenched in their positions these days. I don't think we're going to make any progress unless we come up with new ideas and talk. Because the ideas that have been around for the last 100 years, we're not going to make any progress with each other there. And I think that's, part of why I was interested in becoming a legislative director for you guys, just because I think in order for us to move forward and progress as a society, we need some new ideas.
Yeah, I'm actually super interested in this. And honestly, Seattle seems like a really good city for an idea like this. And maybe it could be something that we look at for the city council. Like, they care so much about Amazon anyways. Maybe Seattle,
right,
instead of a head tax, has a different kind of attack Amazon tax, where it's, slightly more broad than exactly Amazon's number of employees.
And I don't want it to be an attack Amazon tax, right? Because if we're not careful, the business will just leave and go someplace else. I think this truly only works if it's implemented on a broad scale. At a minimum, if it's implemented in all the states where the talent pool is. But better yet, if it's implemented on a national level and international. What it also does is it creates an incentive for corporations to hire people locally, right? Why would you hire somebody in China for half of what you're paying somebody in America if at the end of the year they're going to get paid the same anyway? And I think that could resonate really well for the folks who lost their jobs to people in China. And also, if you are going to have a business in China to meet that market, American companies are going to pay Chinese workers more than Chinese companies, and I think that will reflect positively on us as well. So there's a lot to talk about in it, and I'd like to put it on the table, but I didn't want to put it on the table until I talked to someone else about it. You guys, thank you. And then, I'm interested to see what the comments section says about it, because there are some anti-libertarian elements in it, and I admit that, but I think there's also some really key important libertarian elements in it.
Yeah,
and I think it's a good compromise.
I'm interested to see. So I will put this one on YouTube because Kobe reads the comments. So it'll get it on YouTube. I won't read the comments, but Kobe will. So let him know what you think.
And I didn't even know we weren't on YouTube. So there you go.
Yeah,
so that's how much I read the comments.
The YouTube is only for Kobe, to be quite legislative department, really, because we've got more interactive stuff there that we want more public. Whereas the podcast, I don't care if it's on YouTube because it's just me talking.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I had a thing I was gonna say, but I forgot.
Well, I mean, unless Danielle figures it out, I think it's pretty good. You know, that more or less covers it. Is there more to discuss on that point, Kobe, or is it just to kind of start the conversation and?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, tell us in the Discord. That's who I care about. So if you're in the Discord. I was just saying I remembered my thought, and it's that tell us in the Discord so that Elliot and I can see it.
Oh,
I mean, we want both
Okay.
YouTube and Discord. I'm just saying.
right. Yes. Yes.
Anyway.
Of course. Sorry.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you later. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
I highly recommend that you sign up as a member for Libertarian Party. Like $25 a year.
lpwa.org.
Music is performed by Close to Heart.